Good evening and welcome to our virtual candidate event for those running in the Democratic primary for the 108th New York State Assembly District. They are John McDonald and Sam Fine. My name is Mary Berry. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Albany County. I do not live in the 108th District. This evening's event is being sponsored and run by the League of Women Voters of Albany County and the Council of Albany Neighborhood Associations, or CANA. We also have two promoting sponsors, the Capital Area Council of Churches and the Capital District Latinos. Thank you. And of course, thank you to the candidates for participating and you, the audience, for joining us electronically this evening. The League is a nonpartisan volunteer citizen organization that promotes the informed and active participation of all citizens in government. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates or political parties. The League has a long tradition, 100 years long, of sponsoring candidate events to aid in educating the electorate so that on election day, voters will be able to make informed decisions at the polls. This year, the primary election is on Tuesday, June 23rd. The primary polls will be open for in-person voting from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. Early voting will be from June 13th through June 21st. Please check the Albany County Board of Elections website for times and locations for early voting. Also, all eligible voters should have received an absentee ballot application in the mail. All absentee ballot applications must be received by the Board of Elections by June 16th, so you still have time to send them in. Then the absentee ballot will be sent to you. All may cast their vote by marking their ballot and mailing it back to the Board of Elections in the prepaid return envelope. Remember, to vote in the primary, you must be an enrolled member of the political party holding the election, in this instance, the Democratic Party. In addition, June 9th is the statewide day to cast a vote on local school budgets, school board elections, library budgets, and library board of trustees. There will be no in-person voting. The school district will mail ballots to you. For more information about the voting process and about candidates, go to website vote411.org. The local leagues have prepared online voter guide. This includes information from all candidates who responded to league queries. The county and New York State boards of elections websites have information as well. Just type in your address and information for you will come up. Now for the reason that we are here. The following ground rules have been agreed upon by the candidates in advance and will govern how we proceed. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 1.5 minutes to answer each question in alternating order directed by me, and 2 minutes for a closing statement. Each candidate has been given 2 virtual red cards to be used during the question and answer period. Each card will allow 30 seconds of additional time to be added to their response or to respond to something the other candidate has said. Red cards may not be used to interrupt another candidate's answer. The Albany County League requested all questions to the candidates be submitted in advance electronically to the League's website. There will be no questions accepted this evening. The questions were reviewed. They needed to be addressed to the particular office, not to a particular candidate, and be neutral in tone. They may have been consolidated if similar, and they were eliminated if personal. As I said, the candidates will have up to 1.5 minutes each to answer each question. They will alternate who answers first. The candidates virtually chose a card from my deck of cards to determine order of speaking, high card first. Our timer is on the screen and will give warnings as the time runs out. Our timer this evening is Lynn Nugent. Thank you, Lynn. The League is live streaming this event through its YouTube site. The recording will be available on our website afterwards, lwvalbany.org, as well as on CANA's Facebook page. New York State is divided into 150 assembly districts, each representing approximately 130,000 residents based on the 2010 census. There is still time for all of us to submit our answers for the 2020 census so we can all be counted. I urge you to do that. All assembly members are elected every 2 years with no term limits. The current salary is $110,000 worth per diems. Candidates must be 18 years old, be a citizen of the United States, a resident of New York State for at least 5 years, and a resident of their district for at least 1 year prior to the election. An assembly member's responsibilities include, but are not limited to, creating laws and setting the state budget alongside the governor. They pass bills on public policy matters, set levels of state spending, and vote to uphold or override gubernatorial vetoes. It is now time for opening statements of no more than 2 minutes. Sam Fine will give an opening statement first, followed by John McDonald. Sam.
Thank you. My name is Sam Fine, and I'm running to be the next assembly member for the 108th District. My family's history in the 108th started when my great-grandparents first came here and settled in Albany in the early 20th century as they were seeking the American dream. I'm grateful that this country and this community gave my great-grandparents such opportunity and allowed them to pass down that success to my grandparents. I was inspired to enter public service by my grandfather, who always made it clear that the opportunities that my family had were blocked off for so many people and how much of an injustice that was. He always told a story at my family's Passover Seder, and he said that the Liberty Bell is cracked, and that crack on the Liberty Bell represents that the promise of the American dream is broken for so many people. He believed that we all had to do our part to be bell menders. And that call to be bell menders, that story is what led me to where I am today. It led me to a life of public service. In 2015, I ran for Albany County Legislature because I saw that this dream that my grandparents had lived and that my family had was not reality for so many of my neighbors. I wanted to step up, to be a voice for those in the community, and to use the privileges I have been given for good. Throughout my tenure in the Albany County Legislature, I've worked closely with members of the community. I prioritize legislation that will improve people's lives, and I go into every community interaction with the intention to help people. I want my constituents to see me as someone they can come to with problems, as someone who will deliver real solutions. I'm running for assembly because I'm tired of the go along to get along politics that we see too much of, and because I believe that we need proactive leaders who champion the issues that impact people throughout our communities. I'm looking forward to presenting my vision for the 108th District to you tonight, and I hope to earn your vote on June 23rd.
Thank you, Sam. John? Wait, John, your mic is off.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, good.
way to go. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mary. And first of all, thanks to League One voters, to CANA, and also to our presenting sponsors, the Capital Area Council of Churches, and my friends over at the Capital District Latinos. It's a pleasure to be involved with this forum this evening. And just as much, it's a pleasure to be running for my 5th term in the New York State Assembly. You know, I remember in 2012, a reporter said to me, longtime reporter, said, he goes, "Why are you running for the assembly? You've been elected handily as mayor of Cohoes for 4 years. You've done a great job. Why are you doing that?" And I said, to be honest with you, it's great being mayor, but it's also a great opportunity to take the skill set that you have, the experience you have, to the state level and to make a greater difference in people's lives. Most of you know I'm a pharmacist. I grew up in our family's pharmacy, have worked tirelessly over the last 40 some odd years. I've been a pharmacist for 38 years. And I've always likened the job of being an elected official and being a pharmacist to be very similar in that people come to you with concerns and problems and they want solutions. They want a listening ear. They want someone who's going to listen, internalize, understand what's going on, and take action. And that's what I've been doing for the 21 years I've been fortunate enough to serve in public service. In the assembly, I came in with a very large class. Many of you know that. And I've been very fortunate to move up in leadership, one of the first members of our class to be in the leadership in the assembly. And just this past year, Speaker Hasty appointed me, one of the first members of our class, as a chairperson of a committee. That speaks to the fact that I'm hardworking, that I'm persistent, but also at the same token, I do my work. I do my homework. I make sure I understand the issues. I'm not always a yes vote. There's many times I've broken with leadership because at the end of the day, I'm here to represent the interests of all of our constituents throughout the district.
Thank you. Now it's time for questions from the audience. I will read the questions and John will go answer first for the first question, but it has 3 parts, so I'm going to have you alternate. It's I thought we could begin with some quick and easy yes or no questions. So here we go. John, you're first. Do you support a state-sponsored universal health care plan like the New York Health Act? Yes or no?
Yes.
Sam? Sam is muted. Wait, Sam, unmute yourself.
Okay.
There.
Yes, I strongly support it. Do we have time to say more?
Nope.
Is this just a simple yes? Okay.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, the second one is, and this is for Sam first. Do you support campaign financing legislation for state elected offices?
Yes, I strongly support.
John?
Yes.
And this one is for John first. Do you support term limits for statewide offices?
Yes.
Sam?
Some offices.
Okay. So now this next question, Sam will answer first. And the question is, many articles have stated the economic recovery will be slow, say 1 to 2 years. What are your plans for introducing or supporting legislation to help renters and homeowners during the pandemic recovery, especially those who will not get back their jobs either due to permanent layoffs, reduced hours, or some other reason? You have 1.5 minutes.
For me?
Sam.
Yes. Right now, it's very difficult times. The pandemic has made a lot of people are very concerned about their finances and their health. And we know that both renters and homeowners right now are really struggling. What I believe is that we need to provide real relief for people. So the Assembly and the Senate, they just passed legislation that provided rent relief. But I think that there's some shortcomings in that. It only was funded with $100 million. And it also bases people's need based on their situation before the pandemic rather than their current situation. And so what I think we really need to do is provide real relief for people who are struggling based on the situation they're in now. And the funding can't be limited because then people will be denied and they'll go on a wait list. And we have the funding to do this. We just have to have the courage to tax the wealthiest people in this state. We have a number of proposals in the state legislature right now. that have been proposed that add up to upwards of $30 billion in revenue. Things like the stock transfer tax, things like the ultra billionaires tax, the pied-à-terre tax that would tax high value properties in New York City. We have the ability to raise these funds. We just have to have the political will to do it, and then we can protect the resources we rely on, and we can ensure that our local governments continue to get the funding they need so property owners don't face tax increases.
Lynn, thank you. Thank you, Sam. John, you have to unmute yourself. John, wait.
I'm there. Please,
There you go.
can you repeat the question, please? I was watching Mary with the Lynn with the notes, so.
The many articles have stated the economic recovery will be slow, say 1 to 2 years. What are your plans for introducing or supporting legislation to help renters and homeowners during the pandemic recovery, especially those who will not get their jobs back, either due to permanent layoffs, reduced hours, or some other reason?
Thanks, Mary. And we've already started to take action. We took action last week. We took it swiftly. And we appropriated $100 million of federal money that came to the state to help both tenants and landlords. When I say landlords, I'm talking about small landlords, not the corporate giants, but the average person owns a 2 or 3 family in the South End. People are hurting. And to be honest with you, I wish we had more resources to do it. But unfortunately, and Sam knows the resources we talk about, these are many items that I actually sponsor some of these revenue raises as well. But the reality is, even if we passed them today, they wouldn't take effect till next year at the earliest. And some would question how effective they would be, particularly in a down real estate market when it comes to the pied-à-terre. So I've taken a very aggressive stance in regards to the fact that we need to help people now. We can't wait. And that's why the Assembly and the Senate came together last week in special session to address this.
Thank you. The next question will be answered by John first. So unmute your John. Thank you.
Gotcha.
The question is, currently, the New York State Constitution requires that voters who wish to vote by absentee ballot must be out of their county of residence or provide a reason for requesting an absentee ballot. Would you support a constitutional amendment that would allow voters to obtain a no excuse absentee ballot? What other voting reforms will you propose or support in the upcoming legislative session?
I am fully supportive of no excuse absentee ballots. I don't think there's any reason. We want more people to be involved in the electoral process, plain and simple. I've supported that legislation in the Assembly. It's something we'll bring up again in our next session to bring it to the people to make that decision. And I think it's important. I've also been a very strong advocate for campaign finance reform, which plays a large role in elections. I'm one of the few upstate members who voted to basically take the big money out of campaigns. I voted to lower campaign contributions to Assembly members and to senators. I actually voted as well to make sure that we eliminate many of the LLC loopholes that are out there. So my record is strong in that aspect. There's way too much money involved in politics. And at the end of the day, we want people within the respective Assembly and Senate districts making the decision on who they vote, not on people contributing from outside the district.
Thank you. Sam?
Yes, I strongly support mail voting. I think this pandemic, as we see, is really exposing a lot of the flaws within our system, and this is one of them. The fact that we've really been behind for years on accessibility to voting in New York State, and I'm very happy that we've made some big strides in the last few years. But there's a lot more that we can do. We have to do mail voting, and I'm glad that the state legislature is taking that step to pass a constitutional amendment that will then go to the voters. We need automatic voter registration as well. Campaign finance reform, the public financing system that was passed is a very strong step in the right direction, but we also have to continue to lower campaign contributions. Even with lowering the campaign contributions, they're far higher still. You can donate much more to a governor's campaign in New York than you can to a presidential campaign. And federal campaign law bans corporate donations, but we allow them in New York State. And I believe that's a step we have to take as well, because we have far too much of an influence on corporations and wealthy donors in our political system. I've actually taken a pledge not to accept any corporate donations or any money from corporate PACs. I think that's a really important distinction about me and my campaign. And I think that really proves the commitment that I have to represent the people and the people only.
Thank you. Sam, you will answer the next question first. And the question is, evidence has emerged indicating that adverse outcomes from COVID-19 are disproportionately experienced by residents of low-income and minority communities. These same communities experience higher exposure to air and water pollution than others and bear a higher burden of disease due to many other contributing factors. Examples of these issues can be found in Cohoes at Norlight and in the south end of Albany from the industry and traffic of the port. Another example of high levels of air pollution can be found in Ravenna from the Lafarge cement plant. What will you do when the legislature convenes in January to stop these negative impacts before more damage is done?
Yes, that's one of the unfortunate things, one of the many unfortunate things about this pandemic is that it's so disproportionately impacting low-income people and people of color. And, again, I think this is part of there's always been disproportionate health impacts on low-income people and people of color, but this is really further exposing this to the wider public. And I believe now we really have to take action to address it, now more than ever. And so Ezra Prentice, public housing that's next to the Port of Albany in the South End, I've been working with the community there for a while. I proposed legislation aimed at requiring the global company there to paint those tanks white because the DEC declared that would actually reduce pollution. We have to hold those companies accountable. We have to build new safe housing there in Norlight. It's great that action was taken to ban PFAS, but at the same time, a lot more has to be done. It's been there for years, and we need much stricter regulations. The state regulations on hazardous waste burning facilities are insufficient. They do not test for enough chemicals. They do not test enough, and we cannot trust those results that is safe for the community there. With the Lafarge plant in Queens, I am a co-sponsor of a bill in the Albany County Legislature that would ban tire burning. We have to, it's extremely important that we ban the burning of tires before it starts.
Thank you. John?
Where do you begin and where do you end when it comes to the environmental justice zones of the 108th Assembly District? From one end to the other, from the south end of Albany up to Cohoes to Norlight and across the river to Dunn Landfill. It's part of our history. It's part of our makeup. We were the industrial zone at the time. And unfortunately, people long before us made decisions to locate public housing in some of the worst communities, which has only exacerbated the disparities that many individuals living in poverty, particularly those of color, are struggling with. As a healthcare professional, I see this. I'm more sensitive than the average person to this because I know about the high intensity of asthma in our children in these communities. And that's why I've worked collaboratively with all of the elected officials at the local level, the state level, the county level, and the federal government to bring solutions. Down in Ezra Prentice, working with Mayor Sheehan, the county executive, we petitioned the governor to get $500,000 to do a more in-depth study on exactly what the environmental issues were at Ezra Prentice. And obviously the truck traffic, the diesel emissions have made a large difference. And we're working on that solution now to detour those vehicles. Dunn Landfill convened the elected officials and DEC to make the polluter over there at Dunn Landfill spend $350,000 to remove the odors that we're going to start to see results. And as you know, I am still working very closely and hope to pass very soon legislation to prohibit the incineration of AFFF in Cohoes at Norlight.
Thank you. John, you will answer this question first. The question is, what actions or other legislative initiatives will you take to support local governments in your district as they struggle to recover from both the coronavirus shutdown and the aftermath of George Floyd protests?
Oh, good, I'm still on, thank you. As you know, as one who has served in local government for 13 years, who was president of the Conference of Mayors, I know the local government issues pretty much more than everybody else. And we work diligently with the mayors, with the associations, to address a lot of the issues that the average person doesn't see. You know, whether it's simple things like helping include their support fees for their road paving. But when it comes to COVID-19, we've got a lot of work to do because we can't make up the sales tax that they've lost. We've got to find ways to bring more aid to the communities. We also have to provide more resources to our law enforcement departments to make sure they have the appropriate resources to train their officers properly. The George Floyd incident definitely exposed not only racism that is just totally unacceptable in this country, but it also reminds us that law enforcement is not an easy job. We need to have the resources in place. That's why legislation that Pat Fahey and I worked on together to bring lead money to the city of Albany to help them to help residents who are struggling with mental health and behavioral health issues are not becoming arrested, but are getting support and treatment. We need to find more programs like that that can help them help our community. And at the same token, train our officers properly, give them the resources. Law enforcement's changed an awful lot since I was a young kid. It's still not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you very much. Sam?
Yes, we have to address the systemic racism within our society. George Floyd's murder was tragic murder, and it was an injustice, and it's affecting a lot of people in our communities, very much so. And people are out protesting, and people are taking action. And we hope that we'll use this opportunity to pass real change that will reform our police system and also address a lot of the inequities within our society. Policies like the Safer New York Act, which will repeals 50A, a law that seals police misconduct, as well as other police transparency and oversight laws, are very important. We also have to support our local governments with resources to help our communities, education, healthcare. We have to, when we're talking about policing, when we're talking about public safety, we can't always, our reaction is always to put more money into police, but we have to put more money into our community. People are frustrated and people are protesting because of an unjust system that has left so many communities neglected for so long, so many people living in poverty and without opportunities. And if we want to address that, we're going to have to invest in Black and brown communities throughout the state, and especially throughout the 108th district. And I want to add again, we can do this. Our local governments are struggling now, I know, but we can tax the rich. We have to have the courage to tax the wealthiest people so that we can invest in our communities.
Thank you, Sam. Sam, you will answer this question first. The question is, would you support the New York State Legislature revisiting Section 50A of the New York State Civil Rights Law, which protects police officers' records from public knowledge so that the public can have confidence in law enforcement?
Thank you. I guess if I knew you were going to ask this here, I wouldn't have mentioned it in the last question, but yes, I strongly support repealing 50A. 50A is one of the toughest laws in the country that protects police disciplinary records. The public has a right to know. These should be transparent. What we're seeing now, what we're seeing now is something that, honestly, it's something that Black Americans have experienced on a day-to-day basis and experienced their whole lives. And I've been thinking about the situation, everything going on over the past few days, and it's really hard for me to comprehend how a lot of people feel. But what I do is I try my best to get on the community and listen to people and try to understand as best as I can. And I think we have to repair our policing system. We have to really rethink how we look at public safety, and we absolutely have to repeal 50A. This is something that should have been done years ago. I'm glad that this pandemic or this I'm glad that the murder of George Floyd is maybe exposing a lot of the injustices to the wider public, and I believe that we may have a real opportunity to pass the repeal of 50A and to pass other police reforms that are part of the Safer New York Act, and to legalize marijuana and a lot of other criminal justice reforms. But we have to recognize that that these things really should have been done a long time ago, because this is the experience that Black Americans have been facing on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. John?
There you go. So of course, I support 50A. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, and I look forward to passing that bill next week when we convene, when the legislature reconvenes. Many of you know I was a mayor. I was elected in 1999, started in 2000, and I inherited a police department that had a lot of issues, had a long history of not providing the proper training and resources to their officers. And the department, to be honest with you, was out of control. I changed the leadership, and I did the difficult things. I fired police officers. And anybody who knows how difficult that is realizes that's a Herculean task. 50A is an issue. It's been an issue. It should have been addressed a long time ago. Unfortunately, only in the last 2 years have the houses been aligned on this issue. I think we can't ignore the fact that many things that we would have liked to have done 10, 12, 20 years ago, it depends on where the legislature is along with the executive. I do believe that both houses of the legislature and the executive are properly aligned right now to address this issue, and I look forward to casting my vote next week.
Thank you. John, you will answer this next question first. And the question has two parts. Do you support legislation known as HALT to end solitary confinement? And do you support legislation to release aging prisoners to parole?
So the HALT bill, I do support. One of the, I guess, the privileges of serving in the legislature is that we have many people come and visit, many advocates, many demonstrators. And I remember my first year in the assembly, not knowing too much about solitary confinement, because I was a mayor, wasn't in the legislature. There is a display of exactly what an individual would be in, what the cell would be. And I stepped in and said, my God, why? Why would anyone allow this to happen? So I have been a supporter of that. I am also a supporter of the early release for those over 55 for nonviolent crimes. Many of the individuals who were arrested and convicted a long time ago under some draconian laws have still been serving time in prison, and it's unfair. Many of these individuals are not a threat to society by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's important, though, that they have the proper resources, and I think that's where the correction system has an opportunity to shine, to prepare these individuals to acclimate properly back into society, to make sure they have the proper housing, the proper job training. This is something we work with our veterans here at the Vets House here in Albany. It's something I think we can do a much better job with as a society, because I think it's important to make sure those resources are there first. Otherwise, we're expecting people to go out there and succeed with hardly any resources.
Thank you. Sam?
Yes, I strongly support the HALT Act repealing solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is it's an unjust. I almost can't believe we're still doing this in America. I actually, when I was 13 years old, I remember I was visiting family in Pennsylvania, and we went to the Pennsylvania State Penitentiary, which was a museum. It was turned into a museum. And that was one of the first places they started the solitary confinement practice. It was in the early 1900s. Everyone was thrown in solitary confinement. And we toured the museum, and they showed it to us as this was something of the past, when this backwards way of thinking, where they locked people up in rooms and they had no contact with the outside. And it drives people crazy. There's no reason that we should be practicing this. We have to, our prison system has to be geared more towards rehabilitation. We have to be thinking of the people who come in there as humans, as people, and try to ensure they're ready when they come out. When it comes to releasing people who are older, absolutely. Someone has served their time, or someone is older and they've recovered. They've rehabilitated. They're not a threat to society. It's time to let them out. This was an important bill, again, before the pandemic, but COVID is exposing these people to more and more dangers. Now they're at much greater risk. So this is a much more urgent bill that we have to pass.
Thank you. Sam, this question is for you first. Do you have a plan to address solid waste management that does not involve incineration or transporting solid waste into our communities to be stored, incinerated, or buried? Should the permit for the Dunn landfill in Rensselaer be renewed in 2022?
The permit for the Dunn landfill should not be renewed in 2022. The Dunn landfill is a landfill that's directly next to the public schools in Rensselaer. That permit should never have been approved. It's endangering the kids who go there every day. We need to put people's health above all else, especially the interests and the profits of corporations. I will do, as an assembly member, everything I can do through legislation, through putting pressure, through working with the community to make sure that permit is not renewed. When it comes to solid waste, we have a real problem with the amount of waste that we create in our society, and I recognize there's no good way to dispose of it, whether it's an incinerator or a landfill. But incinerating is not a good option. Is not a good option, and especially should never be put in a residential community, especially hazardous waste. We have to cut back on our waste. I think that's the biggest thing that we have to do. Everything you purchase online, you get it on Amazon, it comes wrapped in a bunch of plastic and styrofoam. We passed something I co-sponsored in the Albany County Legislature. We banned styrofoam. We recently banned plastic straws. I co-sponsored banning plastic bags before the state proposed it, and then I co-sponsored the 5-cent fee on paper bags, because we have to reduce waste. I know these are difficult. No one wants to cut back on these things, but we have to for the greater good of our society. We're ruining our planet and we're endangering our health.
Thank you. John?
I don't control the mute button. So
Oh,
yeah, unfortunately, we're waiting on Patricia, but that's okay. Thank you.
sorry.
So a couple things. First of all, in regards to municipal solid waste, what we need to do is what we did in Cohoes back in 2003 when I was mayor. We need to change behavior. Back then, I went out and said, you know what? I am so sick of watching the tonnage increase at the Colony landfill. So we went out, gave everybody 2 garbage cans, bought garbage cans with covers to cut the litter flowing through the streets, because everybody just threw it on the streets. And guess what? We dropped our tonnage by 25%. It saved the taxpayers money, it made the city cleaner, and by the way, it increased our recycling by double. We need to continue support those type of efforts. Being a member of the legislature, we have discretionary funds that we can direct to municipalities. I directed some to Watervliet 4 or 5 years ago, because they've been working on an anaerobic digestion project, which is having an impact in regards to taking more waste out of the landfills. I do not support incineration of municipal solid waste. Now, on Dunn landfill, let's be clear, that is only for construction and demolition debris. However, some of those items do break down, and that's what's caused the odors. I've been a strong convener. I've pushed DEC. I've pushed the operators, Waste Connections, to make sure that they operate according to law and to follow their permit. That permit was issued long before I got to the legislature. And quite honestly, if they don't shape up their act, their permit should not be renewed when it comes up in 2022. We have just made them spend $350,000 for a new containment system that is going to have a positive impact on odor control.
Thank you. And John, you will answer the next question first, and it will be the last question before the closing statements. The question is, ethics seem to have taken a back seat to COVID-19. What do you feel are appropriate measures to improve the culture at the state government level?
There's a couple things in regards to that aspect. One, I think greater disclosure. I am the only member of the legislature that posts his ethics disclosure forms on his own state website, the assembly website, and my campaign website. I think part of the problem that we've had is that the voters have sent people to the legislature and they truly don't know who they're voting for. My life is an open book. There's no surprises. I am who I am. I'm a hardworking person, both professionally as a pharmacist, as a business owner, and as a legislator. I think the other thing we need to do is we need to take a very hard look, and I'm co-sponsored legislation to shake up JCOPE, to change JCOPE. We have a Legislative Ethics Commission, we have JCOPE, two different entities. We need one. And we need one that's going to have more individuals outside of appointments of the legislature and the executive who are truly independent. They get appointed for 5 years to be totally independent from the appointing authorities, and the majority of them should come from the court system. I think it's time that JCOPE is changed. It should not be controlled by the executive, and the Legislative Ethics Commission should not be controlled by the legislature. We need to let other interests take control.
Thank you. Sam? Sam?
We were both,
Okay.
I was pressing unmute at the same time as you, so I think it's clear the people have lost trust in the system. And this is because of because they read in the paper about ethics violations, about elected officials misusing per diems, a variety of other ethics violations. It's because they feel that their elected officials aren't responding to them, and they feel that they vote people in and nothing happens. I also strongly support reforming JCOPE. I think we have to have completely independent ethics commissions that look at all of the state legislators and look at their financial filings, look at what we're all doing to ensure that we're operating ethically, and there needs to be real teeth with the organization to take action when there are violations. I want to point out that I've made a pledge not to take any corporate donations. I think when it comes to ethics, reforming the campaign finance system is extremely important too. I think what a lot of people are upset, not just with the violations of ethics, but with the fact that they don't feel that their elected officials are acting ethically or morally or in their interests, because they often rightfully so feel that their representatives are answering to special interests, answering to corporations over the interests of them. So we have to reform our campaign finance system to get rid of the influence of big money if we want to have a truly ethical and moral legislative system.
Thank you. That's the end of the question and answer period of our program. And now we will have the closing statements, and Sam will go first. So Sam, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. To me, holding public office, it's not just about the votes you take or the bills you sign on to. On paper, my opponent and I, we agree on a lot of policies, and we're both Democrats, and we would vote the same way on many issues. But the biggest difference between me and my opponent is that I don't see my job as a public official as something that stops when I leave the chamber. I'm running for New York State Assembly because I see my role as a public servant as being a person who's involved in the everyday lives of my constituents, who's committed to the community, who talks to people in the community and not just signs on to bills, but also has the courage to fight for bills, to fight for that progressive legislation that's going to make an impact in people's lives. With this pandemic, it's been tough for a lot of people, and our everyday lives have been completely changed. And now more than ever, we need leaders who have the strength and the courage and the willingness to be a real resource for people. We need leaders that show up, and we need leaders that do everything they can to make a difference for the people in our communities. Throughout this pandemic, I've held multiple events with my constituents. I've had conversations with our community to address real solutions we're going to need as we come out of this crisis. I've distributed flyers about testing sites and even given out hand sanitizers to people. While serving in the Albany County Legislature for the past 4 years, I dedicated myself to spending time with my community, to listen, to understand what concerns people have, and how we can most effectively make a change for the better and pass legislation that really makes a difference in people's lives. As we come out of this pandemic, we need leaders who are going to engage with our community. We're going to create real solutions that work for all of us. We need leaders that will be out in the community every day. We need leaders who work with people to make a real positive impact in their lives. I am that leader. If you elect me, you will continue to see me out in our community, standing up against corporate interests and standing up for the values that I believe in.
Thank you, Sam. John? You have 2 minutes.
Once again, to the League, to Kana, and to our sponsors this evening, thank you for sponsoring this debate. It's been very informative and helpful. As I say quite often, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been very fortunate to have public service and serve the public for the last 21 years. We are in an extremely difficult time. And this is a time when experience matters and results matter. And I've delivered for this Assembly District time after time after time, whether it's supporting many of the nonprofits like Capital Roots, A Village, I can go on and on, Unity House, whether it's working closely with all of our mayors and supervisors throughout the district. I'm very fortunate to have the support of almost every single elected official throughout this district. And I think that speaks volumes to the fact that they know I know my job and I do it well. I am out on a regular basis throughout the community. No one outworks me. No one outvisits me by any stretch of the imagination. But more importantly, I'm an independent voice. Yes, I was an executive of the city for 13 years. I'm an executive of a business for the last 34 years. So I know that I have to listen to all individuals, all sides of the issue. I am not beholden to one little fraction of the party. I am not beholden to any political entity. I am beholden to the people throughout the 108th Assembly District. People know my reputation. They know I'm a hard worker. I humbly ask for their support on June 23rd and look forward to continuing to serve in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Remember, you will be able to see a recording of this evening's event shortly on the Albany County League's website. A big thank you to our candidates, to all our volunteers, and especially to our technical support team led by Larson Volk. Please stay on the line, and the Democratic primary candidate event for the position of Albany County District Attorney will begin shortly.